I am Joshua, 32 years old, and my own mother banned me from our family's Thanksgiving dinner because my blue-collar job would embarrass my brother's rich fiancé. Before I tell you about how I ended up controlling my brother's $15 million inheritance and kicking him off his high horse, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The smell of motor oil and burnt coffee is basically my cologne. I teach automotive repair at the local vocational high school, and I spend my evenings working at an independent garage to make extra cash. It is honest work. It is hard work. But in my family, hard work does not matter if it does not come with a corner office and a tailored suit. My brother, Carter, is the golden child. He is a financial director, a guy who talks about synergy and profit margins while wearing shoes that cost more than my monthly salary. My parents, especially my mother Diana, worship the ground he walks on. I am just the mechanic, the invisible older brother. It was exactly 5 days before Thanksgiving. I was under the hood of a beat-up 2012 Honda Civic, trying to free a rusted serpentine belt tensioner. The shop was freezing. My knuckles were bleeding from slipping off a wrench. My phone buzzed against the metal tool tray. I pulled my hand out, wiped the grease off on a red shop rag, and looked at the screen. It was my mother. I hit the accept button and put it on speaker. I said hello. Her voice came through the tiny speaker, sharp and rushed. She did not ask how I was doing. She did not ask if I was working. She just got straight to the point. Joshua, she said, her tone dripping with that false sweetness she used when she was about to do something cruel. I am calling about Thursday. Carter is bringing Julian to dinner. Julian was Carter's new fiancé, a heavy-hitting CEO of some tech venture capital firm. My mother had been talking about him for months like he was a visiting king. That is great, Mom, I said, leaning over the fender. I am looking forward to meeting him. I can bring my famous smoked brisket. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that sucks the air right out of your lungs. Actually, Joshua, that is why I am calling, she said. The sweetness was gone, replaced by cold steel. Carter and I talked. He doesn't think it is a good idea for you to be there. I stopped moving. I stared at the rusted bolt in front of me. What do you mean? Julian is very high society, Joshua. He comes from old money. Carter is trying to make a good impression. And honestly, your lifestyle might not send the right message. You are a mechanic, a teacher. You always have grease under your fingernails. Your blue-collar job would embarrass him. We just want a sophisticated evening. You understand, right? I gripped the edge of the car fender. The cold metal bit into my palm. I could feel my heart pounding in my throat. I looked around the empty shop. The harsh fluorescent lights suddenly felt blinding. She was disinviting me from my own family's Thanksgiving dinner because I worked with my hands. Because I wasn't rich enough to sit at their table. My father was in the background. I heard him mumble something. He always mumbled. He never stood up for me. Not once in 32 years. I understand, I said. My voice was completely flat. Oh, good. She sighed, sounding genuinely relieved. I knew you would be reasonable. We will drop off some leftovers on Black Friday. Have a good night, sweetie. The line went dead. I stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the air compressor in the corner of the shop. I did not throw my phone. I did not scream. I just picked up my wrench and went back to work. I felt completely hollowed out. But what my mother did not know, what Carter did not know, was that I was sitting on a secret, a massive one. Fast forward 5 days. The Monday after Thanksgiving. The sun had barely set, and the winter wind was howling against the windows of my small apartment. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking a cheap beer, when the pounding started. It was not a polite knock. It was furious, violent pounding that rattled the door frame. I stood up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. My mother was standing there, her face red with rage. Carter was right behind her, pacing the hallway like a caged animal. And behind them, looking perfectly calm and wearing a cashmere overcoat, was Julian, the CEO. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled the door open. Before I could even say a word, Carter shoved his finger in my face. His eyes were wild. "You piece of garbage," he spit. "What did you do?" My mother pushed her way past me into my living room, looking around at my worn-out furniture with absolute disgust. "How could you, Joshua?" she screamed. "After everything we have done for you." I stood calmly in the doorway. I did not blink. I looked past them, right at Julian. Julian stepped forward. He looked at my mother. He looked at Carter. Then he looked at me. He took a deep breath, and the moment he saw me, his fiancée immediately said something that made the blood drain entirely out of my mother's face. But to understand how we got to that moment in my hallway, you need to know what happened 2 years ago. 2 years ago, my grandpa Charles passed away. His funeral was the last time my family was truly in the same room without arguing. Grandpa Charles was a self-made man. He started with a single hardware store and built it into a regional supply empire. But you would never know it by looking at him. He drove a 10-year-old truck, wore flannel shirts, and spent his weekends in his woodshop. He was the only person in the family who understood me. While Carter was begging for a new BMW for his high school graduation, I was in the garage with Grandpa, learning how to rebuild a carburetor. He valued sweat equity. He valued character. He saw right through my mother's obsession with country clubs and social status, and he definitely saw through Carter's arrogance. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from Mr. Gray, Grandpa's estate lawyer. He asked me to come to his office alone. I sat in a leather chair in a high-rise building downtown, feeling completely out of place in my work boots. Mr. Gray slid a thick manila folder across the desk. "Your grandfather left the bulk of his liquid assets in an irrevocable trust," Mr. Gray said, adjusting his glasses. $15 million. I nearly choked on the water I was drinking. 15 million? I knew he was comfortable, but I had no idea he had that kind of wealth. "Yes," Mr. Gray continued. "The beneficiary of the trust is your brother, Carter." I felt a slight sting of rejection, but I nodded. It made sense to them. Carter was the finance guy. He knew how to handle money. "Good for him," I said quietly. Mr. Gray held up a hand. "Let me finish, Joshua. Carter is the beneficiary, but he does not have access to the money. Your grandfather appointed you as the sole trustee. You control every single penny. You have complete discretion over distributions. You can authorize them, delay them, or deny them entirely." I stared at the lawyer, my mind spinning. "Why me?" Mr. Gray opened a drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "He wanted you to read this." I opened the letter. It was written in Grandpa's messy handwriting. "Joshua, if you are reading this, I am gone. I left the money to Carter because he is going to need it, but he is reckless, arrogant, and blinded by status. Your mother ruined him. If I give him this money now, he will blow it on sports cars and bad investments to impress people who do not care about him. You are the rock of this family, Josh. You know the value of $1. You know hard work. Carter needs to learn the value of money and hard work. I am counting on you to teach him. Do not give him a dime until he proves he is a man." I folded the letter. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I decided right then to keep the trust a secret. I did not want our relationship to be about money. I just wanted my family to love me for me. I wanted to see if Carter would ever treat me with respect on his own. I kept that secret for 2 years. And that brings us back to Thanksgiving night. The night I sat alone. It was 7 o'clock. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, eating cold pizza and grading safety exams for my high school automotive class. Outside, the streets were quiet. Everyone was with their families. I tried to focus on the papers, but the silence in my apartment was deafening. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the family group chat. I had been muted all day, but they forgot to remove me from the photo album. Ava, my cousin, had uploaded pictures from the Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. I opened the album. There was my mother, glowing, wearing a brand new dress. There was my father carving the turkey. And there was Carter, sitting at the head of the table next to Julian. They looked so incredibly happy. There was no empty chair. There was no missing plate. They had completely erased me from the holiday. I swiped to the next photo. It was a close-up of Carter and Julian holding glasses of champagne. But my eyes immediately zoomed in on Carter's wrist. He was wearing Grandpa Charles's vintage gold Patek Philippe watch. My blood boiled. That watch was completely broken when Grandpa died. I had spent 6 months tracking down original replacement parts from Switzerland. I spent dozens of hours at my workbench with a magnifying glass, carefully rebuilding the movement until it ticked perfectly again. I gave it to my mother to keep safe in the family safe. Below the picture, my mother had commented, "So proud of my boy Carter. He bought himself this beautiful vintage watch to celebrate his big promotion. Julian loves it." She lied. She gave my brother the watch I fixed with my own hands, and she let him pretend he bought it with his finance salary to impress his rich boyfriend. I swiped to the next picture. It was a shot of the driveway. Sitting right in the middle, gleaming under the streetlights, was a brand new, slate gray Porsche 911. The caption read, "Carter's new toy, a Porsche." Carter's salary was good, but it wasn't Porsche 911 good. He was living beyond his means to keep up appearances with Julian. I dropped my phone on the table. The cold pizza suddenly made me nauseous. I had spent 2 years hiding a $15 million inheritance, hoping my family would just love me, hoping they would invite me over, hoping they would respect my mechanic's salary. And they repaid me by stealing my hard work, lying about it, and locking me out of my own home. I stood up. I walked over to the sink and dumped the rest of my dinner in the trash. The sadness was gone. It evaporated completely, leaving behind a cold, hard, focused anger. I was done being the invisible brother. I was done taking the high road. The next morning, Black Friday, the school was closed. I went straight to the garage. I needed to work with my hands. I needed the noise of the air wrenches and the smell of exhaust to clear my head. My buddy Elijah, a master mechanic who had been working in the bay next to mine for 5 years, noticed I was aggressively tearing down a transmission. He wiped his hands on a towel and walked over. "You are stripping those bolts, Josh," he said, leaning against the toolbox. "What is going on? You look like you want to punch a hole through the engine block." I put the wrench down. I took a deep breath. I told him everything. I told him about the phone call, the Thanksgiving dinner, the watch, the Porsche, and the $15 million trust. Elijah stared at me for a full minute. He didn't blink. Finally, he shook his head. "Brother," he said softly, "you have let them walk all over you for 32 years because you are a good man. You think if you just stay quiet and work hard, they will magically wake up and see your value. They won't. Your grandfather gave you that trust for a reason. He knew they were toxic. It is time to stop being the punching bag and start being the boss." He was right. Elijah was completely right. I washed my hands, changed out of my greasy coveralls, and put on a clean button-down shirt. I got into my truck and drove straight to downtown Boston. Mr. Gray's office was on the 40th floor. The receptionist looked at my scuffed boots and jeans, but when I gave her my name, her attitude changed instantly. Mr. Gray ushered me into his office immediately. I sat down. Mr. Gray folded his hands on the mahogany desk. "How can I help you, Joshua?" "I want to know exactly what my powers are as the trustee," I said. My voice was steady. No hesitation. Mr. Gray smiled, a very small, very sharp smile. "As I told you 2 years ago, you are the absolute authority. Carter is approaching his 28th birthday, which is when the trust language allows for initial distributions. However, you can authorize a standard distribution, defer it, or add strict conditions he must meet before he sees a single dime." I nodded. "Carter just bought a Porsche. He is engaged to a venture capitalist. He is living a life he cannot afford. He has learned absolutely nothing about the value of money." "Then it is your duty to teach him," Mr. Gray said. We spent the next 2 hours drafting documents. I was not going to cut him off forever, but I was going to put up a brick wall. As I stood up to leave, Mr. Gray opened a drawer and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold foil lettering. "I believe you will want this," he said, handing it to me. I opened it. It was an invitation to the Beacon Hill Winter Charity Gala. It was the most exclusive high society event in the city. The tickets cost thousands of dollars. I looked at Mr. Gray, confused. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because Joshua, you are a founding donor," he replied. I stared at him. Then I remembered. 2 years ago, Grandpa Charles had left me a personal cash bequest of $50,000. I did not want it. I had enough to live on. So, I asked Mr. Gray to quietly donate it to a youth education charity my grandfather always supported. "The charity is hosting this gala," Mr. Gray explained. "They have been trying to invite their anonymous founding donor for 2 years. I think it is time you attended. Especially since I happen to know that Julian's venture capital firm is the primary corporate sponsor of the event this year. Carter and your parents will absolutely be there trying to network." I looked at the gold lettering on the invitation. A slow, dark realization crept into my mind. I slipped the envelope into my jacket pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Gray." I walked out of the law firm and took the elevator down to the lobby. As I walked to my truck, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text message. Not from my mother. Not from Carter. It was from my cousin Cameron. Cameron was the only person in the family I thought I could trust. We played baseball together as kids. He called me occasionally to ask for advice on his truck. The text read, "Hey Josh, so sorry about Thanksgiving. Aunt Diana is out of control. Let's grab a beer this weekend." I smiled, feeling a brief moment of warmth. I typed a reply, but right as I was about to hit send, another text popped up. It was a screenshot. Cameron had accidentally sent me a screenshot of his text conversation with Carter. I zoomed in on the image. Cameron's text to Carter. "Just saw Josh walking out of the Gray and Associates law firm downtown. He looked pissed. You sure he doesn't know about the money?" Carter's reply, "Let him be pissed. He's a broke mechanic. He doesn't know anything. I'll handle the trust next week when I turn 28. Keep an eye on him." My blood ran completely cold. Cameron was a spy. He was a two-faced snake playing the sympathetic cousin while reporting my movements to Carter. I deleted my reply to Cameron. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the passenger seat of my truck. The betrayal stung, but it was exactly what I needed. It burned away the last tiny shred of guilt I had left. They were all in on it. They all viewed me as a pawn. I started the engine. The storm wasn't just coming anymore. I was driving right into the center of it. The weekend passed in a blur of anticipation. I did not answer my phone. I did not text anyone back. I spent Saturday at a high-end tailor in downtown Boston. I took $2,000 out of my savings account and bought a custom-fitted midnight blue tuxedo. If I was going to step into their world, I was going to do it wearing armor. By Monday afternoon, the pressure cooker finally exploded. Carter was not an idiot, but he was arrogant. He had promised Julian that he had significant capital to invest in Julian's new tech startup. Carter had assumed that the second he turned 28, the $15 million trust would automatically transfer to his bank account. He was wrong. Wyatt, Julian's sharp-eyed financial advisor, had started doing due diligence on Carter's assets for the startup investment. Wyatt pulled the trust documents. Wyatt saw the name of the sole trustee. I was sitting on my couch, polishing a pair of black leather Oxfords, when my phone started vibrating off the coffee table. It was Carter. I let it ring. 10 seconds later, it was my mother. I let it ring. Then my father. Then Cameron. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree for 20 straight minutes. The panic was palpable through the screen. Wyatt had told Julian, and Julian had asked Carter why his older brother, the mechanic, was in control of his entire financial future. Carter's entire house of cards was collapsing. That brings us to the pounding on the door. Monday night, 6 o'clock. I pulled the door open. Carter, my mother Diana, and Julian were standing in my hallway. Carter shoved his finger in my face. "You piece of garbage," he spit. "What did you do?" My mother pushed her way past me into my living room. "How could you, Joshua?" she screamed. "After everything we have done for you." I stood calmly in the doorway. I was already wearing my dress shirt, the black bow tie hanging untied around my neck. I looked past them, right at Julian. Julian looked immaculate in a tailored suit, but his eyes were darting back and forth, trying to understand the chaos. Carter grabbed my arm. I swatted his hand away with enough force to make him stumble backward. "Do not touch me," I said. My voice was low, but it echoed in the small hallway. "What the hell is going on?" Carter yelled, his face turning purple. "Wyatt says you are the trustee. Wyatt says you control Grandpa's money. This has to be a mistake. You are a grease monkey. You teach teenagers how to change oil. Grandpa would never give you that kind of power." "He gave me the power precisely because of who I am, Carter," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "And precisely because of who you are." My mother stepped between us, trying to play the diplomat, but her eyes were full of venom. "Joshua, honey, let's be reasonable. Clearly, your grandfather was confused at the end. You don't know the first thing about finance or large-scale investments. You need to sign the trustee rights over to Carter immediately. Or better yet, sign them over to me. We can fix this before it gets messy." I looked at my mother, the woman who banned me from Thanksgiving so she wouldn't be embarrassed. "No," I said simply. "What do you mean, no?" Carter screamed. "That is my money. I am using it to buy into Julian's firm. I already promised him." I looked at Julian. Julian shifted uncomfortably. "You promised money you do not have, Carter," I said. "You bought a Porsche on credit, assuming you could pay it off today. You gave Mom the vintage watch I spent 6 months repairing, and you took the credit for it. You are a fraud." Carter lunged forward, but Julian put a firm hand on his chest, stopping him. "Joshua," Julian said smoothly, stepping to the front. His voice was calm, authoritative. "I understand there is family tension here, but let's look at this logically. Carter is a financial director. You have a blue-collar job. Managing $15 million is incredibly complex. I can have my lawyers draft a transfer of power tomorrow. We will compensate you for your time. $50,000. Cash. Just sign the papers." He was trying to buy me off. He looked at me the exact same way my mother did, like I was a peasant who could be distracted with a few shiny coins. I reached up and slowly tied my bow tie. I adjusted the collar. Then I walked over to the closet and pulled out the midnight blue tuxedo jacket. I slipped it on. It fit perfectly. I turned back to them. They were staring at me in stunned silence. "I do not need your $50,000, Julian," I said, buttoning the jacket. "I am the sole trustee of an irrevocable trust. The law is entirely on my side. I will not sign over anything." Carter looked like he was going to have a stroke. "You are ruining my life," he shrieked. "You are just jealous. You have always been jealous of me." I walked toward the door. I did not look angry. I just looked bored. "I have to go," I said, pulling my keys off the counter. "I have a prior engagement." "Where the hell do you think you are going?" my mother demanded, blocking the doorway. "You are not leaving until you fix this." I looked her dead in the eye. "I am going to the Beacon Hill Winter Charity Gala, Mother. I hear it is going to be a very sophisticated evening." I stepped past her, walked out the door, and locked it behind me, leaving them standing in my living room, absolutely speechless. The Beacon Hill Charity Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the city's oldest luxury hotel. The valet took the keys to my truck, trying to hide his surprise as I stepped out wearing a tuxedo that easily rivaled the ones stepping out of the Bentleys and Mercedes. I walked up the marble steps. The air was thick with expensive perfume and the sound of a string quartet. At the entrance to the ballroom, a man with a clipboard and a stern face was checking invitations. His name tag read, Luke, Event Manager. I approached the podium. "Name, please?" Luke asked without looking up. "Joshua," I replied. Luke scanned the list. He frowned. He looked at my face, then down at his list again. "I do not see a Joshua on the general admission list, sir." "I know," I said. Before I could explain, I heard a sharp, mocking laugh behind me. Well, look who managed to rent a tuxedo." I turned around. It was Carter. My mother Diana was right beside him, wearing a glittering silver gown. Julian was standing a few feet away, talking to some executives, looking frustrated. They must have rushed straight here after I left my apartment. Carter stepped up next to me, a smug smile plastered across his face. What are you doing here, Josh? Did you come to bust the tables? This is a private, $10,000 a plate event. You do not belong here. Go back to your garage. My mother leaned in, whispering fiercely. Stop making a scene, Joshua. You are embarrassing us. Leave right now before security throws you out. We will deal with the trust tomorrow. Luke, the event manager, cleared his throat, looking annoyed. Sir, if you are not on the list, I must ask you to step aside. We have VIPs arriving. Carter smirked. Hear that? Step aside. I did not move. I reached into my inside jacket pocket and pulled out the heavy, cream-colored envelope with gold foil lettering. I handed it to Luke. Check the VIP founding donor list, I said quietly. Luke opened the envelope. He pulled out the black metal card inside. His eyes widened. The color drained from his face as he looked from the card to me. My apologies, sir, Luke stammered, his arrogant tone vanishing instantly. Right this way. Thank you for your incredible generosity to the foundation. Carter froze. His smug smile vanished. What? He snapped. What generosity? He is a mechanic. At that exact moment, Julian finished his conversation and walked over to us. He looked stressed. Carter, we need to go inside. The foundation board is about to do the opening toast. Julian, Carter whined, pointing at me. Tell this manager to kick Joshua out. He is trying to crash the party. Julian finally looked at me, really looked at me, and then his eyes dropped to the black metal card in Luke's hand. The card had my name engraved on it. Julian stopped dead in his tracks. The moment they saw me, Julian immediately said, Wait, you are Joshua? The Joshua who funded the youth education wing? I buttoned my jacket. Yes. Julian's jaw practically hit the marble floor. He turned to Carter, his voice suddenly sharp and cold. Carter, you told me your brother was a deadbeat mechanic who leached off your parents. You never mentioned he was the anonymous founding donor of this entire charity foundation. The foundation my company has been trying to partner with for 2 years. Carter stammered, looking like a fish out of water. He fixes cars. I don't know what is going on. My mother looked like she was going to faint. She grabbed Carter's arm to steady herself. Just then, the crowd parted, and Mr. Gray, the estate lawyer, walked up. He was wearing a classic tuxedo and carrying a glass of champagne. Ah, Joshua, Mr. Gray said loudly, making sure the surrounding executives heard him. It is an honor to finally see you at one of these events. The board is thrilled. Mr. Gray? Carter gasped. What are you doing here? Mr. Gray turned to Carter, his expression turning to ice. I am here to support my client. A client who not only manages a $15 million trust with absolute financial brilliance, but who also gives back to his community. People were staring now. The elite of Boston society were watching the golden child and the social climbing mother get dressed down in the lobby. Julian stepped away from Carter. He looked at Carter with pure disgust. You lied to me about your brother. You lied to me about your capital. You are a complete liability. Julian turned his back on Carter and extended his hand to me. Joshua, I deeply apologize for my behavior at your apartment. I was operating under false information. I would love to buy you a drink and discuss your vision for the youth wing. I looked at Julian's hand. Then I looked at Carter. Carter's eyes were filled with tears of absolute humiliation. His fiancée was bowing to the mechanic. I did not shake Julian's hand. I am here to enjoy the string quartet, Julian, I said smoothly. I do not talk business off the clock. I turned and walked past Luke, past my mother, past my crumbling brother, and stepped into the grand ballroom. The doors closed behind me. This is a moment that changed everything. When I finally regained control of my life. Thank you for your patience in getting this far. You are amazing. Please help me like the video and leave a comment with the number 1 below so I know you've been with me this far. This will not only help more people find this story, but also let me know that my experiences are meaningful to someone. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to continue sharing the rest of this journey. I did not stay at the gala very long. I had a glass of bourbon, listened to the opening speeches, and watched from the balcony as Julian spent the entire night aggressively ignoring Carter. My mother sat in a corner booth, looking pale and completely defeated. She didn't try to network. She didn't try to mingle. The illusion she had built her entire life on was shattered. I left through a side door, got my truck from the valet, and drove back to my apartment. I slept better that night than I had in 2 years. The next morning, Tuesday, I was back at the garage in my coveralls, changing brake pads on a Toyota. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. It was Mr. Gray. "They are in my office," Mr. Gray said. "Your mother, your father, and Carter. They are demanding a meeting. Tell them I will be there in 30 minutes, I said. I didn't change clothes this time. I didn't put on a suit. I walked into Mr. Gray's pristine, mahogany-paneled conference room wearing my work boots, jeans, and a shirt stained with grease. Carter was pacing the room. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his hair uncombed. My mother was sitting perfectly still, staring at her hands. My father, Robert, was standing by the window. Uncle David was also there. I had called him on my way over and asked him to be present as a neutral family witness. David was my father's younger brother, a quiet guy who ran a hardware store. He knew the family dynamics, but he usually stayed out of it. I sat down at the head of the table. Mr. Gray sat next to me. "Let's get this over with," I said. Carter slammed his hands on the table. "You embarrassed me," he yelled. "Julian broke off the engagement this morning. He called off the startup investment. My life is ruined, and it is your fault. You need to release the funds to me right now so I can fix this." I leaned back in the leather chair. "Carter, your life is ruined because you built it on lies. You lied about the watch. You lied about the car. You lied about me." My mother finally looked up. "Joshua, please. He is your brother. You are punishing him because you are bitter about Thanksgiving. That is incredibly petty." I let out a harsh laugh. "Petty? You banned me from a family holiday because my job wasn't fancy enough for you. You have spent 32 years making me feel like a second-class citizen in my own family. This isn't about Thanksgiving, Mom. This is about Grandpa Charles." I pulled a document out of a folder Mr. Gray handed me and slid it across the table. "This is my official declaration as the trustee," I stated, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "Effective immediately, all financial distributions from the trust are deferred for 12 months. Carter, you will not receive a single penny." Carter let out a choked gasp. 12 months? I have a Porsche payment. I have rent on a luxury condo. I will go bankrupt. "That is the point," I said coldly. "You need to learn how to live within your means. Furthermore, you will not receive any funds until you complete a certified 6-month financial management course, and not some online seminar. A real proctored course. You need to learn the value of the money you want to spend. You can't do this," Carter screamed, looking at Mr. Gray. "He can't do this." Mr. Gray adjusted his glasses. "Actually, Carter, he can. His power is absolute. If you attempt to sue, the trust will use its own capital to fight you in court, draining the very money you are trying to acquire. You have no legal recourse." My mother started crying. Real tears this time. "Joshua, how can you be so cruel to your own flesh and blood?" Before I could answer, Uncle David spoke up from the corner. His voice was gravelly and firm. "Diana, shut your mouth." Everyone turned to look at him. My father looked shocked. David never raised his voice. David walked over and stood behind my chair. He looked at my mother and Carter with absolute disgust. "Charles knew exactly what he was doing. He watched you coddle this boy, Diana. He watched you ignore Joshua while Joshua was the only one in the garage with him, actually doing the work. Joshua isn't being cruel. He is being a man. Something Carter knows nothing about." The room fell dead silent. I looked at my father. He had been staring out the window the entire time. "Dad," I said, "do you have anything to say?" Robert slowly turned around. His eyes were red. He looked at my mother. He looked at Carter. Then he looked at me. For the first time in my entire life, my father stepped away from my mother's side. He walked around the table and stood next to me. "You are right, Joshua," my father said, his voice breaking. "We have treated you terribly. I let her dictate how this family operated. I let her make you feel invisible. I am so sorry. I am so proud of you for standing up for yourself. You did exactly what your grandfather wanted." My mother gasped, holding her hand over her mouth. "Robert." My father ignored her. He put his hand on my shoulder. "I am sorry, son." I felt a tight knot in my chest slowly unravel. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their high society connections. All I ever wanted was respect. And sitting in that conference room, covered in grease, I finally had it. I stood up. I looked at Carter. "Sell the Porsche, Carter. Sell the watch. Start over. I will see you in 12 months. I walked out of the conference room, leaving the storm behind me. 12 months. 365 days. It is funny how time works. When you are stuck in a toxic family dynamic, a year feels like a lifetime of endless, repeating arguments. You wake up exhausted, you go to sleep exhausted, and every holiday is a minefield you have to tiptoe across. But when you finally draw a line in the sand, when you look those people in the eye and demand basic respect, a year passes in the blink of an eye. The air in my apartment suddenly felt cleaner. My shoulders felt lighter. I wasn't carrying the weight of my mother's expectations or my brother's arrogance anymore. The fallout from that night at the Beacon Hill Charity Gala and the subsequent meeting in the lawyer's office was absolute. It was not a quiet, polite adjustment behind closed doors. It was a massive earthquake that leveled my mother's entire social world and shattered my brother's carefully constructed illusion. Let me tell you exactly how fast Julian moved to protect his own interests. In Julian's world of high-stakes venture capital, trust and reputation are the only currencies that actually matter. Carter had lied about his assets. He lied about his family background. He lied about having access to a $15 million inheritance to secure a senior partner position in Julian's new tech startup. When the truth came out in that hotel lobby, Julian didn't just break off the engagement. He executed a brutal corporate excommunication. I heard the details through my Uncle David, who still occasionally talked to my father. Julian's corporate lawyer sent Carter a cease and desist letter by Wednesday morning. They revoked his security badge, boxed up his office, and left his belongings with the lobby security guard. Carter was completely blacklisted from that specific tier of the Boston financial sector. Without Julian's influence, and without the promise of the trust fund to back up his spending, Carter's financial reality crashed down on him with terrifying speed. His salary as a mid-level financial director was decent, but it was absolutely not enough to sustain the fake billionaire lifestyle my mother had encouraged him to build. My buddy Tommy, who runs a repo truck for a living, actually called me about 2 months after the gala. He didn't even know it was Carter's car at first. Tommy was contracted to pick up a slate-gray Porsche 911 from a luxury downtown high-rise because the owner had missed 3 consecutive lease payments. Tommy told me the guy came running out of the lobby in a panic, begging for 1 more week. It was Carter. He had to stand on the sidewalk and watch a greasy tow truck haul his status symbol away into the Boston traffic. Carter had to sell Grandpa Charles's vintage watch to a private collector just to cover the massive penalties for breaking the lease on his luxury condo. He couldn't afford the rent anymore. He packed his expensive suits into trash bags and moved into a very modest, cramped 1-bedroom apartment in a noisy suburb out by the airport. My mother, Diana, did not handle the transition well. She fought it every step of the way. The Boston society blogs had caught wind of the drama at the gala. People talk, especially when someone who acts superior suddenly falls from grace. The women at her exclusive country club stopped inviting her to their private luncheons. The charity boards she had spent a decade trying to climb suddenly stopped returning her phone calls. Uncle David told me she tried to maintain emotional custody over Carter, calling him constantly, blaming me for ruining their lives, telling him they needed to hire a ruthless lawyer to sue me for the inheritance. But for the first time in his entire 30-year life, Carter actually stopped taking her calls. He was too busy drowning in his own bad decisions to listen to her toxic advice. But the biggest shock of the year, the one thing I never saw coming, was my father. 3 months after the gala, Robert finally did what he should have done 2 decades ago. He filed for divorce. There was no messy battle over assets, no bitter fight for the house. He just packed a single suitcase, left his keys on the kitchen counter, and walked out. He showed up at the auto shop one rainy Tuesday afternoon in early spring. I was lying underneath a beat-up Ford F-150, draining a cracked oil pan. The shop was loud, smelling heavily of exhaust fumes, wet asphalt, and brake cleaner. I saw a pair of sensible brown loafers stop next to my red metal toolbox. I wiped my hands on a shop rag, rolled out on my plastic creeper, and looked up. My father was standing there, holding 2 cups of black coffee from the cheap diner down the street. His hair looked a little thinner, and he looked 10 years older, but strangely, his eyes looked more awake than I had ever seen them. He wasn't slouching. He wasn't mumbling. "Can a guy buy his son a cup of coffee?" he asked. His voice was quiet, struggling to be heard over the sound of an air compressor. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him. Then I stood up, took the cup, and nodded toward the break area. We walked over and sat down on 2 overturned plastic milk crates in the corner of the garage. He told me about the divorce. He told me he was moving into a small, rented townhouse near Uncle David's hardware store. And then, he looked me dead in the eye, surrounded by the grime and the noise of my blue-collar life, and he gave me the apology I had been waiting 32 years to hear. "I was a coward, Joshua," he said, staring down into his dark coffee. "I let her treat you like you were less than Carter because it was simply easier for me to avoid the arguments. I convinced myself that because you were physically strong, because you were capable with your hands, you didn't need me to protect you. I was wrong. A father is supposed to protect all his children. I failed you. I stood by and watched her ban you from Thanksgiving, and I didn't say a word. And worse, I let her turn your brother into a man I don't even recognize." He looked up at me, and I saw real tears forming in the corners of his eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me today. I don't expect you to forget. But I am asking for a chance to know the man you grew up to be. Because you are the only one in this family who actually acts like your grandfather." We sat in that loud, echoing garage for over an hour. We didn't magically fix 3 decades of neglect in one rainy afternoon. You can't undo that kind of damage with one conversation. But we laid a foundation. Over the next 9 months, my dad started coming around the shop on Saturday mornings. He didn't try to force deep, emotional talks. He just put on an old shirt and helped me rebuild the transmission on a classic Chevy I was restoring. We didn't talk much while we worked. We just handed each other wrenches. We shared the silence. The grease on our hands was enough of a bridge between us. As for Carter, I stayed entirely out of his way. I enforced the rules of the trust with ironclad discipline. Mr. Gray, the estate lawyer, monitored Carter's progress and sent me monthly updates. Carter actually enrolled in the certified financial management course I had demanded. He didn't try to cheat. He didn't hire someone to take it for him. He sat in a brightly lit community college classroom 2 nights a week, surrounded by 18-year-olds who were just learning how to balance a checkbook and understand credit card interest rates. For a guy who used to give arrogant lectures on corporate synergy and million-dollar buyouts, it must have been an incredibly bitter pill to swallow. But he stayed in the seat. He did the homework. He passed the exams. In late November, exactly 1 year after the Thanksgiving disaster that started this whole chain of events, I drove downtown to Mr. Gray's law firm for our annual trustee review. The receptionist smiled warmly at me this time. I was wearing my scuffed work boots and a heavy flannel shirt, and I did not care who saw me. I belonged there just as much as anyone in a suit. Mr. Gray shook my hand enthusiastically and invited me into his massive corner office. "Well, Joshua," Mr. Gray said, opening a thick manila file on his mahogany desk. "It has been quite a year. I have reviewed Carter's official transcripts. He passed the financial management course with top marks. I also ran a credit check with his permission. He has liquidated his outstanding consumer debt. He is living entirely within his current salary, and he has maintained the same modest apartment for 8 months. I leaned back in the leather chair, processing the information. Does he know the 12-month deferral period is officially up today? He does, Mr. Gray replied, folding his hands. But he has not called me to ask for a distribution. In fact, he sent me a formal email this morning stating he wishes to keep the entire $15 million invested in the conservative index funds we established. He explicitly said he does not trust himself with a lump sum of cash just yet. He asked if you would be willing to just leave it alone for another year to let it grow. A deep, profound sense of relief washed over my entire body. The tight coil of anxiety I had been carrying in my gut finally released. Grandpa Charles's crazy, high-stakes plan was actually working. Carter was finally waking up. He was learning respect for the money, and more importantly, respect for the effort it takes to earn it. That is good, I said, letting out a long breath. Let it ride. Keep it invested. Don't touch a dime. I stood up to leave, ready to head back to the garage. But Mr. Gray held up a finger. Wait, Joshua. There is one more thing. I was instructed to give you this exactly 1 year after you enforced the boundaries of the trust. Not a day sooner. Mr. Gray opened his bottom desk drawer, unlocked a small metal lockbox, and pulled out a small, worn leather journal. He handed it to me across the desk. Your grandfather gave this to me right after he signed his final will and testament. He said you would need it when the storm finally passed. I took the journal. The leather was soft, cracked with age, and it smelled faintly of sawdust, motor oil, and the sweet pipe tobacco Grandpa used to smoke on the back porch. I sat back down slowly and opened the first page. It was a letter, written in Grandpa Charles's distinct, heavy, messy handwriting. Joshua, if you are reading this, it means you did it. It means you stood your ground. I know your mother. I know the absolute hell she probably unleashed on you the second she found out you held the keys to the castle. I know Carter probably called you every name in the book. I know they tried to make you feel small. They have been trying to do that since you were a little boy building birdhouses in my shop. Ever since the doctor told me I was dying, I knew the clock was ticking. I knew Diana would push Carter into a corner he couldn't afford. I gave you the massive burden of this trust because you are the only man in this entire family with a spine made of steel. You do the hard work when nobody is watching. You fix what is broken. That is what mechanics do, Josh. You diagnose the rot, you cut it out, and you rebuild the engine from scratch. You saved your brother. He might hate you right now, or he might finally understand what you did, but you saved him from becoming a hollow, empty suit chasing the approval of people who don't care about him. You broke the cycle of entitlement. You earned this peace. Never let anyone, especially your own mother, look down on the dirt on your hands. That dirt built our family. I am so incredibly proud of you, grandson. Go build a good life. With all my love, Grandpa Charles. I closed the journal. My vision was completely blurred. A single tear tracked down my cheek, cutting right through a faint smear of grease I had missed while washing my face that morning. I didn't wipe the tear away. I just held the old leather journal tightly to my chest, closed my eyes, and finally breathed. I was free. December arrived in Boston with a heavy, quiet blanket of snow. The city looked clean, peaceful, and still. It was December 24th, Christmas Eve. Exactly 1 year ago, I was sitting alone in a freezing apartment, eating a cold slice of leftover pizza, staring at a group chat photo of a family that had entirely erased me from their holiday. I had felt like a ghost haunting my own life. This year, things were completely different. My apartment was filled with the incredible smell of a slow-smoked beef brisket, roasted garlic potatoes, and the sharp, fresh scent of pine from the real tree I had dragged up 3 flights of stairs myself. I had the heat cranked up, and classic rock was playing quietly from the vintage speakers in the corner of the living room. I was not alone. Elijah, my best buddy from the auto shop, was sitting on my couch holding a cold beer. He was celebrating a massive win. The shop owner had finally given him that major promotion to head floor manager, a title and a salary bump he had deserved for years. He was grinning from ear to ear, telling a wild story about a customer who tried to fix a radiator with duct tape. Uncle David was sitting in my worn-out armchair, laughing loudly at Elijah's story. Even Mr. Gray, the high-powered estate lawyer, had accepted my invitation. He was standing by the kitchen island, sipping a glass of good bourbon, looking surprisingly relaxed, wearing a simple sweater instead of his usual intimidating three-piece suit. And sitting right at my small kitchen table, carefully folding paper napkins and setting the silverware, was my father, Robert. There were no crystal chandeliers in my apartment. There were no arrogant venture capitalists in cashmere coats judging the brand of my shoes. There was no fake, strained conversation about social climbing, stock portfolios, or exclusive country club memberships. It was just 5 men, some cheap beer, some good whiskey, and honest, loyal friendship. As I looked around the room, it hit me hard. This was my real family. We sat down to eat around 7 o'clock. We passed the heavy plates of food, told embarrassing stories, and laughed until our ribs ached. Uncle David talked about the days when Grandpa Charles first opened the hardware store. My father listened, smiling, looking lighter and more at peace than he had in decades. There was no tension. There was no walking on eggshells. After we finished dinner, I went into the kitchen to grab another round of drinks from the fridge. My phone, which was sitting on the counter, buzzed, vibrating against the granite. I walked over and looked at the glowing screen. It was a text message from Carter. I hadn't spoken directly to my brother in a year. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. I took a deep breath, preparing myself for whatever anger or demand might be waiting, and I opened the message. "Hey Josh, I know I probably shouldn't text you tonight. I just wanted to say Merry Christmas. I got the official certificate from the finance class today in the mail. I framed it. You were right. About everything. I was arrogant and stupid, and I treated you like garbage because I was insecure. I'm sorry for how I acted. You didn't deserve it. I hope you have a good night." I stared at the words for a long time. I read them twice. There were no hidden demands for money. There was no whining about his living circumstances. There was no manipulation. It was just a simple, honest admission of guilt from a man who had finally hit rock bottom, looked in the mirror, and decided to slowly climb his way back up. I typed a reply. "Merry Christmas, Carter. Good job on finishing the class. I'm proud of you for sticking it out. Let's grab a coffee in the new year. One step at a time." I hit send. I didn't invite him over right then. Boundaries are boundaries for a reason. Forgiveness doesn't mean you immediately open your front door and forget all the pain of the past. It means you leave the porch light on, and you wait to see if they can finally walk up the steps with respect. Carter was on the right path, but he still had a long way to go. And I was okay with waiting. I put my phone in my pocket, grabbed the cold beers, and walked back into the living room. My dad looked up at me from the table and smiled. I smiled back, handed him a beer, and sat down. "I want to share something else with you guys. I used a portion of my grandfather's charitable fund this year to set up a dedicated college fund and trade school scholarship program for underprivileged kids at the vocational high school where I teach. Kids who want to learn a trade, who want to work with their hands, but who don't have the money for heavy-duty tools, work boots, or tuition. Just last week, I handed a full scholarship check to a kid named Mateo. His dad works 3 minimum wage jobs just to keep the lights on. Mateo wants to be a diesel mechanic. When I gave him that check, he cried. I want kids like Mateo to know that their skills are incredibly valuable. I want them to know that building something from the ground up, fixing what is broken, is the most honorable work a person can do in this world. I spent my whole life being the invisible brother. I let my mother's obsession with high society status dictate my own self-worth for far too long. I actually believed that because my collar was blue, because I had dirt under my fingernails, my voice didn't matter. But the absolute truth is, the people who actually run this world, the people who keep the lights on, the engines running, and the water flowing don't need a VIP list to prove they exist. We are the backbone of everything. If you are listening to this right now, and you are the black sheep of your family, If you are the one who constantly gets overlooked because your job isn't glamorous, or your bank account isn't massive, or you simply don't fit into the neat little perfect box your parents designed for you, listen to me very carefully right now. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see it. Do not ever let toxic people hold your heart hostage just because you share the same last name or the same blood. You are absolutely allowed to walk away from tables where respect is no longer being served. You are allowed to set firm boundaries that protect your mental health and your peace. And most importantly, you are allowed to redefine what the word family actually means to you. Family isn't always the people you are born to. Sometimes your real family is the people who stand by you in the freezing garage when your knuckles are bleeding. Family is the people who show up to eat your burnt brisket on Christmas Eve. Family is the people who never, ever ask you to change who you are to fit their narrative. It takes an unbelievable amount of courage to be the one who breaks the cycle of generational trauma and entitlement. It is painful. It feels incredibly lonely at first. You will doubt yourself. But I promise you, when the storm finally clears, and you are standing securely on your own 2 feet, breathing your own clean air without anyone suffocating you, it is entirely worth it. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey with me today. I read every single comment you guys leave, and your support means the world to a regular guy like me. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want to ask you for one quick favor. The hardest, most painful lesson I ever had to learn was that walking away from toxic family members doesn't make you a bad son or a bad brother. It makes you a survivor. This entire journey was a lesson about self-respect, enforcing boundaries, and discovering the true definition of loyalty. If you agree with the choices I made, if you truly believe that hard work, honesty, and character matter far more than flashy job titles and inherited wealth, drop the word "good" in the comments below right now. Let me know that I am not alone in believing that respect has to be earned through actions, not demanded by bloodlines. Your engagement helps push this video out to other people who might be sitting alone right now, needing the courage to stand up to their own toxic families. Stay strong, keep your hands busy, and never let anyone make you feel invisible. I'll see you in the next one.